Hey everybody, welcome to week 3 of psychological testing. This is your overview for this week. And this week we're talking about both the test administration and interviewing techniques. So we'll start out looking at test administration and we'll explore what factors influence test administration. We'll look at things from the perspective of the person who's giving the test, the tester, and how their expectations, what training they've had, how they reinforce specific questions, how all of these factors influence things. We'll also look at the test taker, the person completing the test. How does their language and other subject variables influence them? And subject variables are things like what's going on in their mind. Maybe they have test anxiety. Maybe they came in with a cold or flu. Maybe they're just stressed out. All of these things influence the test. And finally, we'll look at how a little bit of both the tester and the test taker can influence things. So how does the relationship affect things? What about the race of each of these factors, or each of these players in this situation? These things influence things. Then we'll talk about how do we reduce this bias, right? What strategies can we use to reduce this? And we'll talk about things like drift and how training can reduce that. We'll look at how computers can be an effective tool, whether we should use a self or a tester-administered test, depending on the situation, as well as reactivity, deception, and statistics. Then we'll get into interviewing techniques, and we'll start out by exploring an activity where you'll get to see me playing the role of a patient and getting interviewed. And we'll break that down a little more in depth by reviewing things like, what's the difference between a structured and an unstructured interview, and when is which effective? Social facilitation. So how does the interviewer affect me and facilitate my wanting to share, my wanting to give back more? And how does their interviewer attitude also do that? We'll also look at things like flow of communication, active listening, and the 5-point empathy scale. And we'll finally finish up by looking at bias in interviewing and how things like the halo effect, general standoutishness, and in general things like the fundamental attribution error that we tend to place on people affect things. So we have this natural tendency to want to simplify things. Our brain just wants things to be simpler and easier. So sometimes we do that with people as well. We see maybe small parts of a person and generalize them to a larger whole. So we'll talk about how all those things influence things. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Thanks.